So using our ripped up sponge technique, we're going to paint this in washes of color. We don't want to go in and paint it very heavy opaque because that's kind of what we're trying to take out of what this looks like. We're trying to mimic more of a skin tone illusion. So as tempting as it's going to be to just go straight in and paint very heavily, I'm going to do a thin wash of color, and then another thin wash of color, and then another thin wash of color, and just build up the layers. And similar too to how I painted the bald cap, I like to mix paints a bit, so I'm going to start with this rubber mask grease just because it is fairly opaque and can give a really nice base to it. And then I'm going to move into some airbrush, and then I'm going to move into some Skin Illustrator for details. Now it's important to note that this rubber mask grease can be used on the foam latex, but it can't be used on the silicone. If you were to put this on the silicone, it just wouldn't really stick right to it due to what the formula is. So painting silicone, you're much better off using just the Skin Illustrators. Those are going to give you a really beautiful finish, and you can really paint those in washes of color to keep the translucence aspect to it and mimic more of a skin tone idea. Think of two, the whole point of the zombie makeup here is we're giving the illusion that the bone structure is more prominent and that the bones are sticking out and the rest of the face has kind of sunken in because someone has died and turned into a zombie. So think of the bone structure. You're going to be using your contouring, you're going to be using different techniques and colors to bring everything. Instead of bringing it to life, we're going to bring it. I'm just going to give the rest of the face a really light stipple of this similar tone. Again, everything's going to be in washes of color. And this is going to be very imperfect, so we don't want this to be a complete, full, flat foundation wash here. So we're going to go back and add a lot more tone. Now specifically, if this was her wardrobe that she was wearing, we would have to make sure we cover the ears, the chin, the neck, all the way down the arms, if the arms are going to be visible. We're going to pretend like she is going to be wearing a jacket, which she has to wear on, so we're just going to focus on the face and the neck here. But remember, continue it down if the arms are going to be exposed. Because if you only paint it here and here, but you're going to see all of this, then it loses it. It takes it out of it for you. This rubber mask grease is really good to use in the eye area. So what I'm going to do is darken the tone a bit, because remember, all inside this eye area should be fairly dark. We're not trying to completely ghoul her and black it out, but it is going to be a bit darker than what we've been doing. So I'm going to take some of our darkest and a tiny little bit of blue to adjust, to cool it a bit. Kind of remove the warmth of it. And because this is on the eye area, I'm going to keep it really soft with a brush here. Again, we're contouring and shadowing to give the illusion of depth. And just work with the natural, what's already on the prosthetic. So there's some natural highlights and shadows on there, which you can see based on these little ridges and things like that. Just follow that. So on the deepest area, you're going to add a heavier layer of the darker color. And on the higher areas, leave it without, because then you're really pulling in contours that are already there. And you're working with the 3D aspect of it. And then softening on the inside. That'll give you a really high contrast. Be careful too, you see I'm doing a lot of tapping motion. This is so we don't move the prosthetic around a lot. We don't really want to change it too much. You know, we just want to paint on top of it. And also too, the stippling technique is always better because it gives you more of an imperfect finish. This brush is great because you can use the end to get tiny detail and then flip it over and use this side to soften. Even up here under the nose, we can shadow a bit more. I'm also going to take this a bit down here into the face. This is going to be kind of our outline that I'm working on, and then we're going to do some more washes on top. But we want to intensify these wrinkles. A good way to do this when you can't see any visible wrinkles in your model is to have them smile and then see where the face naturally creases. And then you can
make a joke.
Yeah, then you can pull it in from there. Don't forget too, underneath the nose and in the nose area. So I want to go around the chin here. This will help give the illusion of this chin being more pronounced. This way for me. I'm going to go in the temple area and add some darkness here. A little bit of darkness down here for the cheekbones. And you can see how it's starting to take shape. We're kind of giving some heavy base paint here, and then we're going to do blending layers on top. So I'm just intensifying the cheekbones here. Remember, you don't want to start the cheekbone too early. Turn this way for me. So I'm bringing it all the way back into the hairline so that it's actually believable that this is a cheekbone. And a lot of stippling. Again, we're not looking for a really smooth blend here. You can also contour the ear a bit, which feels kind of funny. But doing a little bit of a contour to the ear kind of gives a little something extra. Now. Pulling in a little bit around here as well. Now we'll mimic on the other side. Okay, so after that first kind of base depth is in there, we're going to move on to airbrush and add some more tones in with the airbrush. I'm just protecting her shirt here, that way the airbrush doesn't spray over and get all over the shirt. I'm just going to give a really light powder dust before I go in, just to kind of lock these in place so nothing moves. This is not a heavy powder, it's just a really soft dust, just to blend it all. Hold the contours and colors in place so they don't move. You can see too how adding in the neck contour makes a huge difference. It really helps to complete the character there. I'm going to go in with a lighter tone, not the lightest one, but maybe the second lightest one. And also I'm going to add some of our blue and green to this, because again, I want it to be a really cool tone. Test our color before we go in. Drop that PSI down a bunch. And I like this sort of green tone because it's going to help to really cancel some stuff out. Close your eyes for me. So I'm just going to do a really light spray of this, kind of all over the prosthetic piece first. I'm almost muddling it around because we don't want it to be perfect, remember. We just kind of want to add these little washes of color and have everything eventually blend into this sort of new, strange skin tone. You can play around here with getting closer and further away from the skin. That'll give some different texture and variation and opacity for you. Mix a little bit more of the color up. chin back on me. Hold your breath for 1 second for me. I'm going to spray over your nose. Okay, go ahead and breathe. Okay. Now, before I move on to more colors, I'm going to add with just the straight vein tone here. I'm going to do some tiny little veins going through. It's one of my favorite techniques to add to a zombie. So for this, we're going to turn the airbrush down a lot, and I'm going to take the cap off so I can see exactly where I'm going with it. And I want it to be pretty dark, so I'm going to wait until some of the deeper tone pulls through. That's the airbrush here. Go. Close your eyes. Look your neck. Okay, so now that we have some veins added in, I'm going to go in with our skin illustrator and do some more layers. Just using a light stipple brush for this. It's a little bit of a black that I'm adding in for a little more depth. again, doing light stipples of this all over. And the great thing about a zombie is that it's not real, so it's really your own interpretation at the end of the day. Of course, depending upon what you're making the zombie for, you'll take into consideration, things like how long has the zombie been dead for. That'll affect how aggressive or not aggressive you're going to be with the level of prosthetic and also the level of grossness that you're going to be making their skin into. For example, if they're more of a fresh zombie, they're not going to be as heavy contoured and as intense as this. But we're pretending like she's been a zombie for quite a while, so we're adding a lot in to her. Even though we want the cool tones, I'm adding a little bit of warmth in here just to balance it all. This will also help in adding to the gross texture and color that you're trying to create here. It's really kind of like we're just creating our own tones here, imagining what it would be if zombies were real. And I like to do those veins first. Some people, when they're making a zombie, they'll do the veins at the very end and make that one of their detail layers. But I like to do them first. That way they can kind of soften and appear like they're underneath the rest of the skin versus going with the skin or just sitting on top of it. I find it looks a bit more natural to layer paint on top of them versus them being the focal point at the end. And I'm also going into the hairline. Now that we've got our alcohol makeup, we can go ahead and paint in the silicone, which we were doing with the airbrush also, which is totally fine. But this will blend beautifully over the silicone. Remember, you want the zombie to look kind of dirty too. If you think of what a zombie is, they're meant to be these kind of creatures that live outside and, you know, they eat people, so they'd be kind of messy and not totally perfect. Some bruising will come into play also. That'll help to make it just look a little bit more darken this whole nose area up here. You can see how it takes many layers and many washes to really disguise that foam latex color. Whereas the silicone, you barely even notice that it's here. So that's definitely a challenge of working with foam latex, is just spending the time to really, really paint it and wash after wash after wash of color to get it to where you want it to be. Look straight up for me. Now, one thing you don't want to do then, once we got most of that kind of evened out, what I want to do is add some highlight back in. So we got a lot of contour and shading happening. But what I'm going to do is, instead of using the airbrush with the gun, I'm going to use it on its own with a sponge, which is something you can do too. If you really like the tone of an airbrush, you can definitely do that. I'm just gonna hit this on some of the high points, the highest points, I should say. Sure to get that heavy highlight on the neck too, just for some stark contrast.